Hi, Pat. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Cami?
Pretty good. Pretty good. It was just, we were talking a little bit before about obviously what are we going to talk about today on the episode, and it just seemed appropriate to voice about the destruction and the grief and loss that comes with natural disasters. And I know in our Confident Grief Coach program right now, we have a student who was kind of in the thick of all of that and has been sharing a little bit of her experiences with being in the eye of both of the hurricanes that hit, back to back, in, inland states that aren't necessarily prepared to experience a hurricane. So, just wanted to chat a little bit about how non-death related and death related, I'm sure there were lots of casualties that came with these natural disasters, but just what that is like for people now rebuilding communities from the ground up when these towns have literally been washed away. So just thought that would be something relevant to chat about today.
I think that's great. And I just thought about so we have natural disasters, we have people who lose their homes by fire, by flood, damaged, and they're displaced for a long period of time, their personal belongings, a lot of them destroyed, that type of thing. And I just know um, I have some examples of that. Just one of we you talked about we have someone that's in our confident grief coach certification class right now, and she's very open about what's going on. And her husband and her owned a home in Nashville, and they had relocated to Tampa area, but they still had their home in Asheville. So they still own that home, relocated to Tampa because they started a family and have little boys. They want to be closer to other family. So they happened to be in Tampa at her parents', I think it was, when the Asheville happened. And I remember her just talking about the fear because they couldn't reach anybody and her community and her friends, and feeling so helpless because there was nothing, that they could do immediately except they started a GoFundMe. Her husband and her said, what can we do? What can we do? Because, but to get something going that it's going to go directly to the people that we know. But she said her biggest thing was not being able to find out, are her friends dead or alive, not knowing if their home was still standing. And then, what was it, 2 weeks later, then we get another hurricane and it's in Tampa. And they luckily, their home was saved from that, but it's like back to back. And so this last week, right, she, when we were just had our class, she's just like, I'm exhausted. What was the word that she used? It was just, yeah, kind of like she was spent and just needed to just be still. Stillness was what she needed in her life right now.
Yeah, that's exhausting, just being hyper vigilant, like in that space of unknown for so long. And
Hmm.
I can only imagine what that's like for the people that were like in Asheville. I hear of like, the people that are maybe up on a hill and they had, maybe some minor damage, but then people even just like a couple miles over are without electricity. They've experienced tons of flooding. They don't have fresh water, like they don't have any resources. The roads are washed out. Just how isolating that must and scary. You talk about the fear and just the impact of fear alone being in those spaces, not knowing if your people are alive or dead, or if anyone knows where you are and if help is on the way. And how long will you have to be without these resources that are going to literally sustain your life? Like that. I've never experienced anything like that, but I can just imagine how exhausting, coming out of that and rebuilding from the rubble, just the amount of loss that comes with that is like unfathomable to me.
Well, and I think I liken it. I mean, it's grief. And so, yes, we talk about the death of a loved one a lot, because that's a common thing with grief, but there are so many losses there. And so something like that happens, it's a trauma, you know? And so whether it's the loss of someone that you love dearly, the loss of your home, the loss of your community, it is trauma when it ends, very immediate trauma to have to start dealing with. And we've talked about the science of grief and that type of thing, and the way our neurobiology is. And we have to rewire some things, because all of a sudden it's like that computer in the brain just did what do we want to call it, like a hard set. Like it just
Yeah.
like stopped. It froze because you don't
Yeah.
know what to do, because it has nothing to pull from, right? Because, right? Yeah.
I'm imagining that little like swirly thing that pops
Yeah.
up when there's like too much going on your computer
The
and it's like,
the circle of death, when you see it
yeah,
like on your Microsoft or whatever. I don't know if it's Windows or if it's like your Mac, the circle of, you're like,
yeah,
oh crap, now you know. And it is.
yeah.
It's like the circle of death.
And like living in that space of like just frozen, paused. And I mean, when we talk about the science of grief and our neurobiology and our nervous system reacting to the fear and the life threat of like literally not knowing if you're going to get killed or not, or if you're going to survive this, and how that is so exhausting and traumatic for your whole system, and how exhausting. Like, what kind of recovery then? How do we rebuild from that? How do we process grief and loss in this, mass scale? Whether it's, I mean, we talk about war, there's so much war happening around the world. And then we have these natural disasters, we have climate change, changing environments and natural resources for people. You talk about the job loss and, loss of your home, loss of relationships. And it's just like, holy moly, at a grand scale of these disasters, how do we start to process grief in community on this level?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that's, what I have seen, with these natural disasters, the community comes together.
Yeah.
2 years ago, we went to Florida after, was that Ian? I can't remember which one it was that, pretty much destroyed the areas that we went to. And they're still rebuilding. They're still rebuilding after that. But what we saw when we went down there is the community just really stepped up for one another. And so, like these places that were, like the beach side, like they would have, oh, what do you want to call them? Like the trucks, the food trucks. And I mean, this is their people, our livelihood,
Yeah.
and that type of thing, or the restaurants and having, and then so when there was a few restaurants open or whatever, and they could start doing that. I talked to one guy, he was at the rental car place in Fort Myers. And he said, a group of us, we go around and we pick a different restaurant whenever we go out to eat. And then we each like tip 50 or $100. And that's their way of giving back. So whoever is like supporting them. So then you might have a table of 5, 10 people sitting around, and that was their way to help support their community, is not leaving a tip of $10 or whatever. They would leave $100, and everybody would leave $100. So you might have taken care of 10 people. That's $1,000 in tips, where they felt like that was just something that's so worthwhile because it was going directly into the pockets of the people who needed it.
Yeah.
And I know,
Yeah.
like the gal that's in our class, she and her husband said we needed to do something. So right away they started this a GoFundMe, knowing that they knew people that they could get the resources, and they took the money and they filled like trucks filled with water cases and the things that we take for granted. We
Yeah.
take for granted having fresh water. They don't have water, right? All those little diapers to put on your child,
Yeah.
formula, all these things that we just so much can take for granted when we haven't been hit with that. And so I think, going back to what you were talking about, the sense of community and community coming together, to me, that's the healing balm for grief. It's being in community and being with other people to help hold us up,
Mhm.
to let them be seen and heard, and do whatever we can. We may not be able to say anything. I can't say, wow, I wish I could fix this for you. That's not going to help, but I can show and band together and help in whatever way to step up. And I think we do a really good job. I think human beings do a really, really good job. The humanity shows up all the time
Mhm.
when these things occur.
Yeah. 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 And as you were speaking about, showing up for people within natural disasters, so much of that reflects to showing up for someone experiencing the loss of, loss by death of a loved one. And I think about how there are roles of the practical support, whether it's delivering water and diapers and formula, or it's like this person is in shock from their loved one who passed. They need groceries, they need errands, their kids, going to school and all these other things that are still happening in their lives. And they need practical support when it comes to adjusting to life after loss. And then we talk about the community aspect of the emotional supports and showing up for someone as human beings, connecting with one another and allowing someone to be seen and heard and witnessed with the tragedy
Mhm.
that they're experiencing, and how that is the same when it comes to the natural disaster or when it comes to someone experiencing loss from death. And how grief is grief in that regard, how showing up as humans in that community aspect totally translates.
And oftentimes people aren't, will say, oh, what would you like me to do? They
Mhm.
don't know. They can't think. We talk about the science of grief. Your brain is just fogged. And so think about, okay, what might be helpful? Buying some groceries that don't take anything to think to do it. I mean, I think meal trains are wonderful just to keep it, but sometimes they're not hungry. But toilet paper, Kleenex, just making sure that those things are around in their house because they're not thinking about going to the grocery store and replenishing their toilet paper or the Kleenex, right? You talked about like with the children and stuff like that. I remember being at a camp once, and it was a young man. He had experienced loss of his dad when he was pretty young, and he had some younger siblings. And mom totally shut down, and so she stopped doing holidays. And thus, the kids had to stop doing holidays because she couldn't bear to go to the family functions. And he got up and talked at our camp, and he was probably 18 by then. And he spoke to the parents that were sitting in the audience and said, I wish my mom would have at least let us kids go to my aunt and uncles or to my grandparents, even if she didn't want to, because that would have been important for us. I missed that we couldn't do that. So think about that. If someone has experienced a great loss and they're totally overwhelmed, see if you can take their kids for an outing just for a short time, because the kids will be freaked out too. Oftentimes may not want to go for a long period of time, but see if you can take them for, an ice cream or just, something to get them away, or come into the house and play with them, and maybe, mom or dad or whoever can go do the things that they need to do. How about helping people with paperwork? I think about these natural disasters. Insurance is overwhelming, right? So what if you could just sit down and say, you know what? How about if I just sit down with you and I'll help you get this paperwork done that needs to be submitted? Because those are the hard things to deal with, and when someone dies, like, you got to get the birth certificates, you got to get this, you got to get that, you got to, all these different things. And just to have someone that can maybe have a little bit clearer executive functioning in there as a support, come in and
Yeah.
help someone with that is so much. I just recently, I told you about, I did a celebration of life a couple weeks ago. very unexpected death. I met with a family this week because I'm going to be doing another one next week. And I guess what kind of showed up for me, it's funny that we're talking about this because I didn't think I'd talk about this, but this morning in the shower, I kept thinking about how the siblings really were gathering together and creating this cocoon of support. And right there during the planning process and helping the person who's grieving. And I think with, the disasters of home, the people that aren't, how can you go in and create that support and help them in because they can't think oftentimes.
Yeah.
Decision
Yeah.
making is very hard.
Yeah. I like that you speak to these various ways that people can support, not necessarily financially. I think there's obviously we need those financial resources. And if you're someone who can donate or provide in that way, that's will go a really long way. But then you're also speaking to just helping with these tasks that are so overwhelming, where it's like, if you're sitting at a computer and you got that little swirly doom thing going on, like you can't do anything on that computer. Like, so if someone can come in and help bring their brain and help you with those things that are just a million times harder when you're in that space of shock, how those just getting through those practical, confusing, overwhelming tasks that just build up and add to, when you don't have capacity to do any of those things, having someone to help with that, or like you mentioned, dropping off groceries, having the neighbor mow the lawn, taking the kids out for a couple hours so everyone can get some breathing room. Like those kinds of things don't always necessarily require that you spend a bunch of money, but it's more so that community banding together, like you said, of showing up and how that
Yeah.
presence is really at the core of grief support.
Yep. And that really is where I think it is the healing balm. The community, the support is the healing balm. However, you can support. That is what's the balm that you put over this horrible wound to just allow it to start knitting together a little bit and getting a little bit of healing and
Yeah.
fusing together, whether it's your home that you lost in a flood, whether it's a loved one who has died, you're going through a divorce. There's just so many things in our lives that when we can step into our humanity, you talked about there's so much going on in the world, and I don't talk politics. I don't have discourse about it because that's who I am. For those who are advocates out there, good for you and kudos because you're living your purpose, right? And that type of thing. I tend to my purpose is a little bit different. It's not to get in the midst of that fray. But there's so much going on here, and I see the sadness and the the anger and all those things that will show up as a grief,
Yeah.
right? And so how can we just be in support of one another,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like, and just however that shows up for people. And the other thing is I want to say it's not just in the US where we're seeing this. When I was somewhere, I don't know if it was Poland, totally flooded. Big floods happened in Poland. When I was in Portugal, where the first place we went to was Porto, and then we left Porto to go to Lisbon. All of a sudden, Porto was on fire, and we're having all these big fires, and they had to get fire support from Spain and all over, because it's a big deal. And then right south of us, there were fires erupting, on this mount, the Sintra Mountain. And so it's like devastation is occurring everywhere, and we tend to think it's happening in our little world. But my hope is we can think bigger and broader, and how can we help for us to support the supporters,
Yeah.
right? It's not just doing grief coaching for individuals who are grieving or communities that are grieving, but how do we support the supporters?
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, caregiving and showing up in these roles as someone who does have a larger capacity to support is still exhausting for the people who are showing up in that traumatic space and using their time and energy and resources to help at a place that doesn't have many of that happening. Like,
Right.
that's exhausting. And I think, yeah, there's another aspect of community to help this web and this chain of just humanity, like you were talking about, how we can all show up for each other in different ways, no matter what your purpose is like, whether it's over here or over there. Like, we're all deeply rooted and connected with one another, even if we don't always feel like it's right here in our own backyard. Like, just, I don't know about you, but energetically feeling like the impact of the just the world right now. Like, I am, for me, a part of my practice with grief support right now is just sitting and doing a loving kindness, compassion meditation and just sending that love and that care and that support to everyone in our grief groups, everybody who I know is impacted by these hurricanes, everybody across the world. I've done some mission trips like in Mexico, and it's like seeing these families that are literally living out of a cardboard box. Like, we take these things for granted, like you were saying, and I think there's such a grief that comes with not having your needs met. And you mentioned this a little bit with the grief with politics and how it's like oftentimes it comes out as anger or resentment towards groups of people or organizations that we want to blame. And really, at the end of the day, it's like, what's going on here that I can, how can I meet my needs better? In what ways am I not showing up for myself or receiving in the way that I need from these places? And that's causing grief, and that's causing a sense of loss and causing us to blame other people. So I think politically, especially, we like to point fingers when really it's, I think, grief of our own that we're experiencing that comes down to how do we be present with that? How do we process that in a healthy way
Right.
rather than taking it out towards other people?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And yeah, we'll kind of see what's happening here in the US, and many countries are watching it too, from what I understand. So it's like how, but to me, it's like we say we can't do anything, but I believe that one person can impact another person, can impact another person, can impact, maybe not on the voting. I mean, our voting system is set up a certain way. So voting is great, but is it going to impact the overall outcome? We don't know. But boy, can our energy impact the outcome of
Mhm.
the people that we are with, and energy begets energy. So when we can sit in a, whether we want to call it prayer, whether we want to call it meditation, I believe that. So I think for Asheville, there is no way they could have predicted all that was going to happen with that mountain and everything and the destruction. They couldn't have predicted all that. It just was, everything just coming in a very horrible way with mudslides and all of that. Tampa, oh my gosh, they were going to be hit, right? They were going to be in the epicenter of the storm, and it was just going to, everybody's thinking, oh my gosh, Tampa's just going to be wiped out. It's going to be all. And everybody put their attention that I know and what I saw on social media of good thoughts, prayers, meditations, positive, please move out of the way, move out of the way. And things did divert. And I believe
Mm.
that that's because of our energy and our collective consciousness of helping to sway that and move that. I believe we have that power. And that's
Yeah.
one by one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's happening globally and collectively, but like you said, in our own communities, in our interactions one-on-one with people. Here, I'm in Kentucky, which is a very rural, more of a conservative state. And out here, I mean, there's all kinds of, I mean, there's billboards up talking about, God and religion and all those very opinionated topics. So I know for my family members, a lot of them were a little bit nervous that here I am with differing points of view on the world coming into this space, and they were nervous for me in that regard. But actually talking with the community members, like real time, here I am, like one-on-one interacting with people. It's that energetic, like I have not felt unsafe. I have not had these disputes or these arguments or anything like that. Like it has been lovely getting to see diversity and getting to see what this community here is like, and to just come into a space open-hearted and energetically just full of that love and compassion, no matter what your belief systems are, no matter how you live your life. And of course, we're all allowed to have our own opinions of things, and that's great too. But I think just like you mentioned, this starts like feet on the ground, like how we interact with one another and the energy that we bring into relationships. And that's something that we can control, and that's something that we
Mhm.
can do, whether it's with our neighbor or whether it's with someone across seas or someone in another state. Praying and taking care of ourselves so that we can support the supporters or support the people that need those resources. Like we are powerful right here, like in our
Yep.
individual beingness, and collectively, we really do have that energetic power, like you were talking about, to shift these things on a conscious collective level.
Yep. Yep. And you know, we're all human, right? And there's going to be things that are going to whip us up, and you know, the energy may get us, especially those of us who are very empathic, can be like, oh, right?
Yeah.
And it's also allowing ourselves grace and forgiveness when we do get all whipped up and we may be saying things or acting in ways that are not truly of our heart. You know,
Mhm.
we will do that, but it's having that grace and having that sense of self compassion and utilizing forgiveness in a way because it helps us and then flows out to everybody else. And I think that's, you know, especially this is a good topic. We came in not knowing really what we were talking about, but I'm thinking it's the last week, we're going into the last week of March. And then, you know, we're going to have going into early November, and the people will be at the polls. They're already starting. And so you can feel the energy. And I know for myself, I just want to sit in just calm. And if people are getting whipped up around me, I'm just going to choose to not interject or, but just sit with peace because I know that
Mm.
peace begets peace. Listen,
Mm.
hear. I might ask a question just, you know, nicely, like, because I'm always curious where people are coming from. But I loved what you said. And that was my takeaway for today is when we're getting all whipped up about stuff, it's probably not the external. It's like, what is this about me?
Yeah.
What needs of mine are not being served, and how can I empower myself to serve those needs? And if it's going to be you know, an activist and that's who you were born to be, go for it. I love it. I love it. I admire you. That's not me, but you go for it, and I think that's beautiful. If it is you know, mending the broken hearts, you know, we do that. That's our role. You know, if it is to bring water, you know, and support like our person, you know, where her community was affected, we all have different ways that we can feed what we feel when we're feeling unsettled. We can find out what it is about us that's not being met and help to meet it ourselves because we all have that empowerment within.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because that gives us, like you mentioned, that empowerment, that choice and that responsibility to take care of ourselves in a way that's not reliant on something that's outside of us. It's not reliant on, the results of the election, or it's not reliant on, the world around us. It's really within ourselves, and it can be so challenging at times, right? Of course, we're influenced by our environment, and that is like an inner compass pointing us to, is there something here that's not being served, that's not being met? Yeah, so I love that you spoke to that.
Yeah, me too. This was good. This was good.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah, thank you. I think this is like, I have this visual of all of these webs of support that just are going across the world, and how we connect with with one another and how powerful that really is. And like how at the end of the day, that really starts with us being grounded and taking care of ourselves and the grief that shows up within us too, and finding those resources so that we can feel filled up and ready to support other people who need us, and how that just keeps rippling out into the world. So powerful
Yep.
stuff.
Powerful stuff. And I'm going to do a shameless plug, but you really are taking the lead, but very soon, well, it's already out there, but we're really like getting this app, the Confident Grief Coach app, out there. And so I'll be sending some information. Maybe we'll do a whole YouTube thing kind of showing what it's like and what the support and our intention is for that, because it is about for the community, supporters, for grief professionals, how we can help support the supporters, the grief professionals, and provide tools and resources that they in turn can use on with their clients, their communities, and that type of thing. So that's just like almost right there. We're so close. And the other thing is we just released, and it's going to go out publicly, hopefully this weekend, is our grief coach starter bundle, which I'm really, really super excited about. I used to give away the book, the Confident Grief Coach book, which is like our manual for the certification, and it was like a freebie. But now we've taken that and we've added in, some really important tools that we use in our Confident Grief Coach programs in the Breathe coaching model. And we made some new things that we included in this bundle. And so please, everybody who's listening, keep an eye out for that. We'll, get something out here and talk a little bit more about that, but I just wanted to share that. And we are now open to be taking applications and pre-enrollment calls for people for our January. Gosh, it just seems unreal because we're already doing 2 classes now. But January is right around the corner with the holidays coming up, and we're going to have one Confident Grief Coach certification program in January, and then we're going to have one of the advanced program that is for people who have been through the Confident Grief Coach who are really want to become certified through the International Coaching Federation or up level their coaching capabilities and really understanding that. So we've got a lot going on. And so we'll share a lot of that in the show notes too, but I just want people to be aware. And so if you're ever looking for some of that information, go to www.healingfamilygrief.com and we'll have all of that information in there and more information about Cami and myself in our Find a Coach page. So
Thanks for that, Pat. It lights me up that, we're talking about how do you nourish yourself so that you can nourish and support other people. And that's exactly what our intention is with these resources. So it feels good to put it out in the world and to share it with
yeah,
others. So yes, if you're
yeah.
listening, I hope you can lovingly receive what we're offering, if that's of interest to you. And yeah, we would love to get connected and hear if there's anything that you would like from us on this show, any resources as a grief support professional that you would like to see, or even as a griever, any topics that you'd like to see discussed. We're open to all of that. So comment below or get in touch with us in the show notes. And thank you so much.
Subscribe and hit the like button too, because that's how we get noted out there. So please do.
True.
Thanks, Cami. We'll talk to you
Thanks, Pat.
next week.
Yep. See ya.
Bye, everybody.